West cases. Mr. Donahoe is unable to be with us today, so Mr. Gillies will be presenting this in his absence. Mr. Gillies, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. As mentioned, the topic today is the the continuation of the discussion of the Upper Magnolia Green project. We had the discussion at the last work session of the Planning Commission. As you all know, this is a large rezoning project in excess of 2,400 acres, consisting of 2 companion rezoning cases referred to as Upper Magnolia Green East, which is for the residential portion of it, and it's 700 acres, and Upper Magnolia Green West, which is for the I-2 CUPD request, and that is approximately 1,728 acres. At the Planning Commission meeting at the last month, we presented the project in a pretty general fashion, 30,000 foot kind of level of detail. Whereas today we plan to provide a few more details on the project and share the analysis of the project thus far from a kind of a department by department standpoint. The format we'll be following for this presentation today is first kind of a general explanation from economic development on the purchase of the property and the reasons why this property is important to be rezoned, both parts of it. And the second part of the presentation will be me giving you again a brief recap of what's happened on the case over the course of the last month, and begin to go over some of the review of the proffers that are related to the planning department. And then next we'll have the environmental engineering department go over the appropriate proffers and answering questions regarding environmental engineering related issues. The same will be done for the utilities department, followed by the transportation department, and then finally concluding. I'll do the conclusions with giving you the next steps and the proposed timeline for this particular project. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Garrett Hart and let him begin his part of the presentation.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, it's good to see all of you. Good to see all of you healthy too. It's a task these days. I'm going to go over the reasons why the Upper Magnolia property is important to us from a job creation and capital investment purpose. I am going to use a presentation that Chairman Winslow has been using in the past 2 community meetings, as well as some additional slides that I've put in place. I'm going to try to address some of the comments we've heard as we go through the community meetings as well. First, though, I thought I would remind everyone, you've seen this presentation before as part of your orientation, of the target marketing sectors that we chase on a regular basis for the county. We do this because they represent the capital investment and the job creation that the county would like to have. We do this because we have the talent in Chesterfield County to supply these industries. We have generally, from the county standpoint, a great location on the eastern seaboard, midway through the north and the south. For all of those reasons, we are highly competitive in these sectors. They are also the sectors that the region chases and the state at large. So these are the lists of projects and sectors that we, on a regular basis, seek to encourage to expand or come to the county. I think also, why? I think I need to start with something very simple. My department, Chesterfield Economic Development, is charged by the Board of Supervisors to create commercial capital investment. We are the revenue side generators. Our job is to increase the commercial capital investment in the county in order that the county can continue to deliver the highest quality services possible. We are also charged with creating quality jobs so the citizens of Chesterfield County can be gainfully employed and improve their quality of life in their community. Those are the two primary goals of our department. The Board of Supervisors on a regular basis meets with us and discusses what are the things we can do to encourage those two goals to be accomplished. Early on, when this board took over, we had an orientation, we talked about it, and what is the single largest threat to us being successful in this, and it's the lack of product. The county does not have any available buildings or sites of any substantial size that we have to market. That is simply the most critical issue we have. We have, although talent is tight, we have talent. We have a location and a community that people want to come and live in. So we can bring the talent. We have location, we have the utilities, we have the investment system and the incentives to compete on a worldwide basis. What we don't have is the size product we need to compete for some of the highest quality jobs and capital investment that the nation is going to see over the next 10 to 20 years. So with that, I will move to the next. So why is Upper Magnolia important? The board purchased Upper Magnolia to acquire property for the schools, to lower the number of residential units that can be provided in that density, to a lower density for the Upper Magnolia case, and to allow the county to best control this important piece of property, create a large acreage economic development site, and improve the road infrastructure in the area. When Mr. Gillies talks about Upper Magnolia East, and he'll talk about the schools and the road improvements, but I will focus particularly on the large economic development sites in the county. The vision for the property is to find the highest quality job creators and capital investment partners we can to create a technology village with partnerships to improve the quality of life for the county and the citizens that live in it. We are focused on clean, quiet, limited visual impacts and lower truck volumes. We have removed, how many total? Over 200 uses. We've removed over 200 uses out of this case and are requesting only 8 uses. Logistics, not one of them. I'm gonna go through some examples of what we would be trying to attract to this acreage. The first one here is a pharmaceutical. The average, the mean average wage for Chesterfield County is just about $53,000 a year. We are seeking jobs that pay more than that. We don't incentivize jobs that pay less than the average prevailing wage. So when you're looking at pharmaceuticals, you're looking at $74,250. This is an example of a SWAM business in Pleasant Prairie where they make injectables, i.e. things that are put into a syringe and then injected into the body. I think this is a particularly interesting one. It's important to, we have heard comments that manufacturing is automating, and this will be filled up with empty buildings with no jobs because manufacturers not creating jobs anymore. It's moving to automation. Part of that's true. Automation, manufacturers have been automating for the past 20 years. They are extremely in the mood to automate now as the labor gets tight and as the cost of labor goes up. But luckily enough, all that automation has to be programmed, cared for, loved, cleaned, moved, repaired, and replaced and redesigned. So what is being created by manufacturing is no longer line jobs, but sophisticated jobs requiring training and technology in order to keep the automation running. and to design that automation and make it more efficient on a daily basis. Those are the jobs we are trying to attract. We are actually not looking for any job that automation will replace. We are looking for the jobs that automation creates. I say this now because of pharmaceutical manufacturing, because pharmaceutical manufacturing is very important to us because it is actually, this region is about to experience a pharmaceutical demand increase due particularly to automation in the pharmaceutical chain. We have a process called flow that was invented by several really great chemists and pharmacists, one of which happens to be a Richmond area resident for all his life, and working with VCU, has created this process called flow, which automates the packaging and capsulization of pharmaceuticals. Because of this invention, he has won, the process has won an NIH grant for $800 million to upscale the process to production levels. They are doing that at BI Chemicals plant in Petersburg, and a lot of the research technology will go on at VCU. Chesterfield sits between those two institutions. There will be hundreds of pharmaceutical manufacturers seeking to apply this technology to their use, creating thousands of jobs in the area. And the jobs we will be chasing for these pharmaceutical manufacturers will be the laboratory jobs, six-figure laboratory jobs, testing the equipment, feeding the equipment, quality control, product design, and so forth. So we agree that manufacturing is automating, and we accept it wholly, because the other thing we mentioned back to what we're doing, manufacturing equipment is extremely expensive, and even though we have a very low machinery and tools tax rate in Chesterfield, we make a lot of income off of machinery and tools. And the more automated the manufacturer is, the more M&T taxes he will pay. Research and development. Obviously, we want to encourage research and development facilities in this park. $122,000 a year annual wage is what we're looking for. This is an example of the EPA's research facility in Research Triangle Park. I would ask for each of these slides to look at the proximity between the manufacturing and the research and the residential in the area. It is, in all these cases, closer than what we are proposing in Upper Magnolia. Engineering services, we identified the engineering services office. Office isn't allowed use in one of the 8s. Engineering services, as well as other white-collar jobs, are of interest to us, with an average wage of $89,000 a year. We identified the Timmons who are in the boulders, and as this planning commission knows very well, because they've rezoned 2 pieces of property across the street from this office for residential use. It is in fact the densification and the close proximity to the jobs that is actually the attraction there. Semiconductors. You'll see in a later slide, semiconductors are making a strong comeback into the U.S. because we do not want to be dependent upon foreign supply, and we do not want to be dependent upon the logistics system it takes to get that foreign supply to us and causing the shortages. This one has clearly the largest salary differential between our existing average salary and the average salary that the industry pays. What you see here is Intel's Coachella campus in Arizona. It has been there for about 20 years. I will point out that the housing that is directly across the street and surrounding it was not there till after the plant came. Data centers. We are in a digital and data center world. The increase in demand for data storage is going to continue to increase and to grow exponentially. We are going to see that data move into bigger facilities. They're basically the cloud. What I'm showing you here is average salary of $91,000 for data centers. The two I'm showing you are Digital Fortress and the Vita facility. Both of them are in Meadowville Technology Park now. The Digital Fortress facility, Digital Fortress just purchased additional land from the EDA in order to quadruple the size of that data center. The Vita facility, the current major tenant, which is Vita, is moving their data to the cloud, and they are moving their offices to a new location in Chesterfield. We are waiting for that transition to occur so that we can bring in new tenants and new owners to the facility. We expect expansion. We have expansion capabilities there and expect it as well. I will point out to you with the data centers in Meadowville, the residential that surrounds. I've never used this pen before in my presentations, and I'm left-handed, so I'm going to swing around on you.
Choose your color.
Hmm?
Choose your color.
Choose a color. Okay. Choose blue. All right. This area here is also designed for data centers. There are two campuses here and here. There are wetlands existing in here. They will not be developed. This residential, majority of it has occurred since Meadowville Technology Park was rezoned. Since Meadowville was rezoned. You can see this construction here. This is the village of Twin Rivers. It is going to include 130 single family, and then I'll show you a picture in a minute where they're clearing for 450 high-value apartments. The developer spoke to me just this week and said it would be the finest development of the apartments that he has created in the county. And Mr. Emerson has done the edge and the view and some of the nicest apartments we have seen. He predicts these to be the best. So what I would say to you in this case, as I continue about Meadowville, this is the entire layout of Meadowville, about 1,300 acres. We've consumed about 800 acres of it. It's a little over 600 left to go. The largest parcel is north of Meadowville Technology Parkway, is about 340 acres. 304 of it is usable. It represents the only site in the county above 250 acres contiguous. I've explained the site here for the site here for additional data centers. Then we have two remaining sites for manufacturing and an office corridor along here. It has been said that the comments are that how can we consider Meadowville a success? Because it's taken 20-some years to develop it. It is, in fact, the fact that it's taken 20 years to develop it that makes it such a success. The county purchased Meadowville for $15.5 million. Land sales thus far have accumulated $25.2 million. And we have approximately 600 acres left to sell. The industries in Meadowville Technology Park employ over 3,500 people and pay a tax of annual taxes of about $3.3 million a year. That's equivalent to 1 penny on the tax rate. Should they not be here in order to have the revenue that we take in on an annual basis, the tax rate would be 1 penny higher. So the revenue from this facility is equal to 1 penny. The reason it has taken 20 years, the reason it's taken 20 years is the county's board of supervisors is extremely particular about who gets to go in here. We have turned down far more projects in Meadowville than we have accepted. Our goals, and unlike a private developer, and this is important, a private developer is going to develop a piece of property. He's going to sell it as fast as he can sell it for as high as he can sell it. He doesn't care what goes in it. He doesn't care what the jobs it creates. He doesn't care if it creates any jobs. If he can get what he wants for it as quick as possible, he's going to do that. That is not the goal that the board has for Meadowville or will have for Upper Magnolia West. The goal is to create the highest quality jobs we possibly can and to get the maximum tax density per acre for every acre that we sell. So what we have done over the years is turn people down or move them to other locations in the county where it was more appropriate. It has acted as an attractant to bring a lot of jobs that did not land here but landed in the county or somewhere in the region. We could, with the demand we have right now, if we wanted to put logistics facilities in here, we could sell the remaining. This is the highest, one of the highest priced pieces of industrial property in the county at $100,000 an acre. We could sell every acre of it in the next 6 months if we wanted to fill it up with warehouses and distribution. It's just that simple. We do not want to do that. That's not the capital investment or the job that we want to continue to create here. At this point, we're going to transition to a time lapse of Meadowville from the purchase in 1994 until today. It runs rather quick. I know that runs fast, and but you've seen as we have improved the infrastructure, as the projects have gone in, you've also seen continuation since 1994, the increased residential development that has surrounded the park. It has been suggested that the manufacturing would be detrimental to the prices of residential in an area in which it is adjacent to, and then encroachment shouldn't be allowed. What we have seen in the history of Meadowville and the history of several other sites in Chesterfield, as well as the projects we just showed you, it's actually the residential that's encroaching on the already zoned manufacturing. It's actually the reverse. You know, we propose to develop a project that will be compatible with residential development of the highest quality and constituent services associated, and the demand created by the park will increase the opportunity for constituent services like entertainment, restaurants, and shopping. I just spoke to you about the income and the job creation of Meadowville. This is a long-term generational project. Meadowville is. Upper Magnolia West would be the same. This is the table now. I'm going to move away from that into the basic need and where we are. The interim president of Virginia Economic Development Partnership had this quote in a presentation that he gave to the legislature and others in order to put in the budget significant funds to create and improve manufacturing sites in Virginia because of the loss of these direct jobs and $75 billion in capital investment, because we haven't had the sites and buildings to be able to. Jason will be here to talk to the Board of Supervisors during their work session to talk directly about this demand. In that 42,000 jobs and $75 billion in CapEx were these projects listed here. You can see we have highlighted the semiconductor projects that we would like to go after. These projects will continue. We'll continue to see these projects over the next 10 to 20 years. Projects of this type. We are a county with the right property, with the right piece of property, and with the right partners in the state, the federal government. We can compete with anybody for projects like this. This shows you that 81 projects since 2015 have needed 200 acres or more. The majority of those projects, 22 billion and 38,000 of those jobs I just referenced earlier slide, were on sites of 250 acres or more. This shows you the number of sites. It represents 51% of the jobs and 78% of the capital investment that the state would see are on sites that are larger than 250 contiguous. So it is extremely important to them to get this. I don't know that you guys can see this very well, but it shows that Chesterfield County currently has 340 acres in Meadowville, 304 of it usable, and 178 acres in James River Industrial Center Zone 3 are the only sites above 100 acres that are available currently in the county. Where are we? And I'm going to talk to you about the Virginia Business Ready Sites Program tier system. It's one of the things we use to evaluate the sites around the county that we evaluated for possible use for manufacturing technology village. The board has identified the raw land and taken control over it. So we are at tier 2 at this point. Getting through the rezoning process would bring us to tier 3. We will move, should we be successful in rezoning the property, we will move quickly to get to tier 4 and 5, and the transportation department and the utilities department will talk to you guys in a little bit about the infrastructure that's needed for us to accomplish this task in detail. With those proffers, comes our need to install that infrastructure in order to be competitive as a site. So not only they are proffers, they are part of bringing the product to fruition in order to make it a viable entity for development. Why? One of the questions that I received from Plan Commission member from a citizen was, who's going to pay for this infrastructure? The infrastructure is going to be paid for in similar manner of Meadowville and the other projects that we've run. Sales of the land inside the park go back into paying for the infrastructure. County funds would be used for implementing the infrastructure. State funds, federal funds, company investment, all of those things are sources for the infrastructure that we would have to install in order to make this park a 4 or a 5. You can see the smart scale statement here. Economic development is one of the key issues in smart scale. So that's transportation money that we would apply for and try to get through the state and federal government. The Virginia Ready Sites Program. There is about $170 million proposed in the current budget to help communities get the infrastructure in place and do the studies necessary to position the property for sale. We want to be part of that. We want to get part of that funding. I don't know if you guys watched the governor's speech yesterday, but he went all in on that funding and declared that we would be in full competition as a state for projects like this, and he was going to include the funds, if not increase them. So the state is prepared to put their money where their mouth is. They are no longer going to throw up their hands and say we don't have any sites. They are going to work with us to create sites. They are looking for communities that have the ability to partner with them to create these sites, that are located in an area where the talent wants to live and is going to grow, and has a utility backbone infrastructure that can supply these sites of this size. I think that completes. I'm happy to answer any questions. Another question that was posed was about there are quite a few streams on this piece of property. They are protected wetlands and with RPAs. We are currently delineating all of that right now. We are confident that we can develop large-scale pads in between those streams, multiple pads that will compete very well for the projects that we expect to see. Once again, this is a long-term investment by the county for creation of jobs and capital investment in the future. How long will it take? It will take us 3 to 5 years to get the infrastructure in place to where it is ready to be installed in 12 to 18 months. It's our intent to be the first request through Smart Scale or Business Ready sites would be to construct 2 lanes of the Powhite Parkway from Hull Street to the site as one of the first infrastructure projects that we would like to accomplish for this park. We would then follow it up with the extension and enlargement of the water and sewer capacity to the property. We'll be seeking assistance from the state and whoever else will give it to us to accomplish the infrastructure development, provided the property is zoned. Should the property not be zoned, we won't pursue any of that. Questions?
Any of the members of the commission have any questions? Yes, Mr. Petrosky.
Thank you, Commissioner Owens. So Garrett, thank you for that presentation.
Sure.
I definitely feel like new schools, better jobs sounds more appealing than suburban residential sprawl. So I think the goal, most likely most people share it. It's just how do we get to that goal? And I know we're going to hear more information. But the one question I had while you're still up here is for the Meadowville Technology Park and the amount of acreage for the businesses there, how does that amount of acreage compare to the potential amount of acreage in Upper Magnolia for the business piece, aside from the schools and everything else that's going to go in there?
Meadowville was 1,300 acres total and ended up a little over 900 usable. Magnolia West is about 1,700 acres. I asked the engineers to try to give me a maximum usable today, but they're still working on that. We're expecting that to be more like the 1,200 to 1,300 usable out of the 1,700.
Okay. So without knowing the exact numbers yet, it's fair to say it will be more than what Meadowville.
It will be bigger, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Other commissioners with questions? I had one question about the infrastructure. You mentioned that you're planning on doing the Powhite Parkway extension from Hull Street to the site. Are there conditions in that get that put in place before any construction begins on this? And what are the plans for the remainder of that? Because one of the things mentioned at some of the community meetings having to do with this project is to extend the Powhite from its existence all the way to Hull Street. And I think one of the fears that the community is going to have is that this infrastructure will get created from Hull Street to the site, and then we end up with this missing middle, and we're still left with the traffic issues on Hull Street.
You will hear from Transportation on the phasing plan to complete the Powhite. The phase 1, 2 lanes from Hull Street to the site. The main purpose of that is to enable us to construct on the site without impacting the back or secondary roads in the area like Duval or Otterdale or Westerly. That's the purpose of that, to get to the site and get on the site. As the site develops, more of the road has to be developed, more of the improvements in the infrastructure for the transportation system have to be developed. We are hoping that ultimately, with a project of or at build out with the number of jobs that this will create and the capital investment that it will create, it will inspire the state to come forth with enough money to complete the entire $700 million project, which is be the extension of the Powhite from its existence at 288 to Hull Street. It can't do anything but help that math work.
Anyone else have questions? Yes, Commissioner Sloan.
So Garrett, what do you feel like the competitiveness of the site is absent the Powhite Parkway?
Absent the Powhite Parkway? The site is going to be extremely competitive once we get the 2 lanes in from Hull Street. and the water and sewer. We can do a whole lot there with that.
And then the transportation's coming up, and, but I'll be very upfront. One of my concerns is, probably being the only planning commissioner and, well, no one on the board lives near an industrial complex like Meadville. I do. I live in Rivers Bend. And I'll be the first one to say that, from a property value standpoint and so forth, I have never seen property values affected by the technology park. However, and this isn't the first time you've heard me make this comment, from day one, 295 ran right through the middle, or right upside the technology park. And while not in the technology park originally, the technology park dumped onto a 4-lane divided highway on the Rivers Bend side, which dumped onto a 4-lane divided highway with Route 10, which is now being expanded to 8 lanes, which got us to 95 or 295 from another area. So Meadville's has always existed in an environment where traffic could get out of a regional area. So from, tractor trailers coming in and out and so forth, and just watching that traffic move in and out, I would think that would be an important component. One of the things that concerns me is the lack of 4-lane access into and out of this site. And I'm not, hope is not the right word, but I'm concerned that a lot of the traffic, to get it out of the larger geographic area, we really need that extension. So I offer that as a concern, because we've heard that, we've heard previously that, whether it's Metal or so forth, it's that access to that, I believe you call it the Golden Highway, right? 95 moving north and south. So I just ask that because perhaps with the types of companies you're trying to attract different from Meadville, it's not as big of an impact, but.
You have heard me talk many times that the greatest piece of commercial infrastructure in the country is 95. And the closest you can be connected to that, the better you are competitiveness. We have exhausted the 95 corridor to a certain extent, although we will continue to put parcels together until we can get parcels that are big enough along 95. The vision for this park is a little different. We are looking for more of a campus for someone, for 1 or 2 or maybe 3 businesses to create substantial capital investment and substantial jobs along the future Powhite, which would be the same as 295 and when it arrives. We are proposing 2 lanes to get into the park. Transportation will be up here to talk to you about all the other things they're going to require to be done as the park expands and grows. That 2-lane highway would only serve the park initially, and then it would connect to the Hull Street, which is a 4-lane divided highway. Not that the traffic is very good on Hull Street. This would somewhat be a reverse commute, but I think the Transportation Department has done an exhaustive transportation plan for this area and study, and we are in agreement with all of the proffers and conditions that they have placed on the project from a transportation standpoint.
Okay. Mr. Chair, if I may just ask a couple more questions. Thank you. So additionally, I was referring back to a lot of the proffer conditions that were put in place on the Matoaca mega site. And in looking through those, there was language in those proffers that would allow for some small ancillary uses, to allow for perhaps a restaurant on campus, those types of things. Do you feel that the proffer should be modified to consider those kind of things as well? It
was decided through planning and and the board to limit the uses to the 8 in order to make this a simple and straightforward case. We are certainly not opposed to some commercial uses inside the inside the west rezoning. It makes sense that there would be things like that serving the campuses that I just described. We are not opposed to that as the EDA. Okay.
I'm good for now, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions for the EDA? Thank you very much, Mr. Hart.
I'll be here later if you need. Thank you.
Mr. Gillies, who's next, sir?
I think I'll go for next. Just to kind of refresh your memory, there are, excuse me, sorry. There, with both of these cases, there are 2,428 acres involved. The Upper Magnolia Green East is again, the residential piece. That is known as Case 21 SN 0675, and it is approximately 700 acres. The Upper Magnolia Green West site, which is the I-2 CUPD case, is the 1,728 plus or minus acres. So it's much larger and it is west of the Powhite. That is the determining factor as to east and west is the alignment of Powhite, proposed Powhite running through the middle of that property. Next slide. Oh, I got it. Just to kind of catch you up on what we've done since the last Planning Commission meeting, or not, I'm sorry, this is basically where we are to date with community meetings and work sessions that we have. We started this process back in September 21st with a community meeting at CTC Hall. And then had another meeting in December 16th here in the public meeting room, as well as, of course, the Planning Commission meeting on the 21st. We had a virtual Zoom meeting with the Summer Lake and Westerly communities on January 6th. And we had a in-person community meeting at CTC Hall again with the Mosley Road residents and others. And today we have our work session again. So this is the 6th time we've had kind of a public session on what's going on with the particular case. All of this information, each of these meetings have been recorded, and videos and companion presentations have been posted on our special web page that we've put together for this project. And except for the January 13th community meeting we just had, I believe we didn't have a video for that particular project. And what did we hear at these 6 different sessions? We've had a variety of community comments that have come in either at these meetings or from the web page, and but they pretty much kind of break down into these 6 different primary issues with the 2 cases. First being buffers. And there has been a lot of discussion about buffers, and particularly to the Upper Magnolia Green West case, the I-2 CUPD case. Residents in that area are concerned with the proximity of the building construction and the uses of their existing homes, obviously. 2, uses. It's also important concern for the residents surrounding the Upper Magnolia Green West, primarily the different uses that are being proposed within this zoning case. Number 3, the Westerly Parkway. The ultimate design of Westerly Parkway has been widely discussed with the Westerly and Summer Lake community and mostly the residents that have been following the Upper Magnolia Green East case. There's also concerns with from those same communities along the east side of future Powhite with the number of schools and associated access points to these public uses in proximity to their neighborhoods. And timing of the construction of the north-south road to Duval. In a later slide, I'll be kind of showing where that north-south road runs and why the timing of that construction is important, and that will be touched on by the Transportation Department also. And then finally, I think there's been a general desire to have continued community engagement as this project moves forward and the projects develop. You've seen this master plan a few times. This is the master plan, a colorized master plan that was pulled out of the 91 case, which was 81 SN 0343. This was the Magnolia Green rezoning case. In this, there were approximately 4,886 dwelling units that were proposed within this project. What you see color-wise here in front of you, the yellow is single-family detached. The brown that you might see on the map, or orange, is the multifamily tracts that were kind of conceptually shown on this, as well as the darker red being the retail or commercial areas within that project. Overall, the zoning was a pretty massive project. As I mentioned, there were almost 5,000 dwelling units allowed within the project. There was roughly over 500,000 square feet of retail allowed, and almost right over 900,000 square feet of office that was all allowed within the project, as well as 320,000 square feet of office warehouse. So a pretty big mix of uses all within this particular project. As it has worked out, the lower Magnolia Green area has developed out with about 2,644 units thus far in that area, and up here there's about 1,336 units that would be allowed. So there's a little bit, about 900 plus units, I think 903 units that are still allowed within the lower Magnolia to be built. But this 13,336 is one of the issues we're trying to deal with the rezoning of this property. For the eastern side, the piece that we're looking at here, we're looking at bringing that number down to about 600 units. So you'll see that not to exceed 600 units. So as we go further into the report, you can see a pretty substantial reduction in the number of dwelling units that could be allowed within the northern or upper Magnolia Green portion of the project. As you have all been told a couple times now, the county purchased upper Magnolia Green, which you see kind of outlined in red here, in December of 2020. And that was right at I believe 1,850 acres were purchased there, and that's basically all of this along here that you kind of see in a red, and the kind of outline in red piece here, all along in here. All that made up that first piece. That came to the board for initiation in September. After that, in October, 589 additional acres, which you see in green here, were also initiated. Once both of those pieces had been initiated, the staff moved forward with creating an electronic application using the county's new electronic land management system, the ELM system. There's been some discussions and confusion as to where the application is for this particular project. It is all a digital program within the ELM project. All the materials and information that are used to create this electronic application are now shown either on our web page that we have so that everybody can see what was on that application, or you can actually go on to ELM and to the ELM portal and see the information that's been submitted yourself. So just to make sure everybody kind of is clear as to what's been submitted thus far. We have met all the requirements that we typically would for any other type of project in reference to moving forward with a rezoning case.
Mr. Gillies? I have a
Yes.
question. Back on the previous slide, the additional properties that are in there.
Yes.
Do we have, as a county, do we own those properties?
No.
Or do we have a contingent offer on them?
We have power of attorney that's been given to us, and a contract is in the works.
Thank you.
Okay? But we do have all the power of POAs in place for that, for representing them with the zoning case. Again, what you see in blue is the 1,700 acres, basically, that's Magnolia West. What you see in orange there, or yellow, is the east, the residential case. What you see in the purple running through the middle of that is the general alignment of the POITE that's been in place since 1991 with the, or even before that, actually the 89 thoroughfare plan showed that general alignment for the POITE. And we're using that as the separation point before these two cases, trying to keep all the, the residential and the public facilities, the schools, the libraries, those type of uses on the yellow piece that you see, and the I-2 CUPD and those type of employment center things on the bluer side of, on the west side of the POITE. Here is basically kind of starting to look at the Upper Magnolia Green West side a little bit in more detail. Here is the concept plan that we're working from for the case. What you see basically in this right now is some of the buffers that are along both the future alignment of the POITE, which is right here. That is what's being proposed for some buffering between the roadway and the industrial uses. And then what you see on the backside, there is a proposed buffer, what we're calling a perimeter buffer, that runs all along the pieces that outline the rest of this west side. So basically the whole project, the 1,700 acres, is going to be encapsulated in some sort of buffer width as the project moves forward. And as to the actual width of those buffers, I'm going to get into that a little bit more, but part of the beauty of this particular zoning case is to try to keep as much as we can clear in the middle portion of the site. We don't know, we don't have any, as Mr. Hart mentioned, we don't have any type of potential businesses coming here yet. We don't know the size of the lots that they would want or the sites they have. So trying to keep that area as open as possible, but still having some design standards in place is the general direction that we'd like to go with this particular project. And having this kind of green outline of buffers all around the property, as well as trying to make sure that we put in some good design standards later with the interior portion of the site is the basic method that we're trying to move forward with the Upper Magnolia West case. As I've mentioned, this is a rezoning for the west side from R9 to an agricultural to an I2 CUPD that would allow for the development of a technology village consisting of an employment generation uses such as advanced manufacturing, research and development, office, commercial uses, and public facilities, including a fire station and the water tower. So that's all that's really being asked for. I know one of the questions we've gotten and concerns we've had all along on this case so far is the use of the zoning category of I2. And within the I2 zoning district, as you all know, we have hundreds of uses. In fact, we have over 211 different uses that are within I2. And on top of that, we have 134 conditional use uses that could be allowed within those zoning districts. So that's a lot, and it's kind of a scary category if you just look at it that way, which is one of the reasons why early on in this process, economic development and administration decided that let's limit it to just the 8 uses that within I2 that are really needed to create a technology village. So here are the 8. None of the other 203 uses are allowed within the Upper Magnolia Green. It's just these 8 that would be allowed, and it would be computer equipment manufacturing, a data center, electronic component and accessory manufacturing, laboratory, offices, pharmaceutical products and manufacturing, plastic products, manufacturing, and research and development facilities. That's it. There's nothing else that would be allowed within that zoning category. We do have a few other uses that are accessory to those permitted uses. Contractors' offices and shop storage area, machine shops, and then warehouses. And so to give you an idea of what this means is, you can't have a standalone, warehouse that just does nothing but just distributes products, such as an Amazon or something like that. The warehouse would have to be directly affiliated with one of those 8 permitted uses. It would have to be the warehouse for maybe a computer product that's being manufactured on the site, or maybe a pharmaceutical use that's being done on that site. That's it. You cannot just have a standalone warehouse use within this particular project. That's not the focus of this particular project. In addition to those 8 primary uses and these 3 accessory uses, the only 2 other uses that we're looking at is a fire station and a water tower. And those 2, unfortunately, just the way we have our I-2 written, require a conditional use to be within an I-2 district. So that's the reason we're having a CUPD for this project, is to allow for a future a fire station if they need that, and a water tower as needed.
Mr. Sloan?
So Andy, so a question and some clarification. You just mentioned that a 200-foot buffer around the perimeter, unless I'm reading something wrong, the proffers say 100 feet. And why have we gone down, so when we did the Matoaca mega site, the perimeter buffering was 300 feet. And we had specific buffers and specific landscaping designs, landscape C, for the interior roads. Should we expect those additions to the proffers that, on this case?
It's still in a work in progress at this point. I'm going to get, next slide I was going to do is start talking about some of the buffer proffers that were currently in the set of proffers that you have before you today. These were the ones that were submitted by EDA as their first blush of proffers to go through for the project, for the Powhite Parkway. Because it's an industrial use and because of trying to provide as much area as possible for development, they're proposing a 50-foot buffer at this point within their proffers along the Powhite. Staff is still proposing the use of a minimum of at least a 200-foot buffer along that Powhite. That is still one of the things that we're working on. As for the schedule of landscaping or trees that are within the natural buffer, most of this property out here is pretty heavily wooded already, and we don't foresee a much need for additional Schedule C or some other type of definition of additional vegetation to be added to the existing natural buffer there, but if need be, that could be added into the case for sure. For the perimeter buffer, the set of proffers that you have before you today outlines a 100-foot buffer. Staff is now proposing, after some of the language discussions we've had with property owners out in that area and looking at some of the positioning of the houses that are in that general area, staff is proposing a minimum of at least 200 feet along some of the perimeter buffer there that we showed you a little earlier on the slide. So that is one of the differences that you see in the package that you have before you, the proffers you have before you today, and what staff's been recommending back to the EDA for future buffer sizes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Ms. Fry.
so Director Gillies, when you're talking about additional distance maintained from existing residential units, would that be in the form of additional buffering or a required setback?
That's a very good question. I'm glad you brought that up. I didn't really touch on that yet. Basically, it could be a couple different ways. It would be most likely some sort of setback and not just an additional buffer. And we would, if the house is set, I'm just using an example of maybe 100 feet back from the property line and making sure maybe there's at least a additional distance between maybe the back of that house and where a building could occur, we'd set some sort of standards up on that, in addition to the 200-foot natural buffer that's already in there. Some of the comments we heard was we don't want to be, too close to the development, and the idea of having a bit more of space between that is a reasonable request for us to try to work at and research and see if there's a way we can provide a bit more spacing between the actual vertical buildings within the site and the existing residential units that are in that area, basically along the Mosley Road area.
And Director Gillies, along those lines, if their berming is sometimes used for visual screening and sound attenuation, would the case provide that if there were any berming, it would be inside that buffer? It wouldn't be taking the place of that buffer. It would be, you'd have your property line, you'd have your buffer, and then if you needed a berm, it would be outside this minimum buffer.
That's one of the discussions we're still having. We have not reached a conclusion as to if the buffer could be part of the 200-foot buffer or be, outside of that and be even further into the property.
Thank you.
Moving on, I've kind of already explained the width of the buffers that we're looking at. So let's move on to the next slide there. Bring this over just a little bit for you. Oh, thank you. Okay. Other items of interest for the Upper Magnolia Green West Technology Village site is the creation of a master plan. Part of this proposal is before we get into having site plans submitted and so forth, the idea of creating a more comprehensive master plan that would be in place for all of the 1,700 acres and would allow for a more coordinated effort of providing signage for landscaping, screening, pedestrian connections, architectural programs. These things would be created in the next, I'm just picking a number of, 6 to 9 months after the development of, or the approval of the zoning case, and would be put in place before any of the site plans could be approved within the 1,700-acre technology village. Screening is another issue that's already been spelled out pretty well in the set of proffers that you have there. Well, the exterior rooftop equipment, trying to screen those. The outdoor storage areas are always an issue we have, as well as dock doors and things like that. So those are all aspects that we're addressing within the screening proffer that's being developed. Pedestrian connections and trails. The applicant want to create a safe pedestrian connections and the design and development in order to facilitate pedestrian movement in the various areas of the property where pedestrian movement is proposed by the applicant. Final trail alignment shall be reviewed and approved by the planning department and the environmental engineering department as we go through the plan review. And the hope is to have a trail system that could work towards getting to Horner Park. We do have some opportunities for building a trail system, maybe somehow, some way get it up to the park area is the direction we'd like to move towards on that. With the development of a master plan, comprehensive master plan for the whole 1,700-acre area, the idea was to try to keep it with a general type of attractive development that we've seen in Meadowville Technology Park. This is an example of the type of development, the campus style of manufacturing development we would be encouraging with that master development plan. Quickly kind of moving towards the description of the Upper Magnolia Green East side.
Mr. Gillies?
Yeah, I'm
Ms.
sorry.
Fry?
Before we go to the east, I did want to go all the way back, Director Gillies, and look at the issues list that you presented
Okay.
and the categories that you had. I have received several emails from folks about concerns that citizens have raised, and I had a couple of others that were gleaned from those emails that I thought
Okay.
should be considered, and I wanted to mention them now.
Sure.
One is stormwater retention, how that's going to be handled, and connected with that is protecting the Swift Creek Reservoir.
Okay.
So I think those may be connected, and wastewater. How would wastewater be handled depending upon the type of use that would be developed?
Okay. I think both environmental engineering and utilities will be handling some of that today, if we get to them.
So thank you for adding those.
Sure.
Yes, Mr. Sloan.
Also, Andy, just out of curiosity, when we look at the overall nature of the project, and we look at Mr. Hart's presentation, where the objective is clean, quiet, limited visual, and reduced trucks, I don't see any proffered conditions that speak to performance standards in the project.
It's a good point, and I think we are entering kind of that aspect of the proffers to see what might work in reference. You're referring to like for sound or for other types of noise, dust, things like that?
Any.
Yeah. I think those are coming. We really haven't had it in this round of proffers, but the idea of putting some of those within a industrial park project makes sense. There is so much land here that some of those issues I don't think are as important as maybe they could be with a more of an industrial style, but with the limited number of uses that we have here and the amount of land that we have, I think having some safeguards in place would still be something we need to work towards, for sure.
Andy, just as a general comment, we've all worked lots of cases. I've worked more than my fair share of the industrial cases down in the Bermuda District. We've always had them.
Okay.
Mr. Gillis, can we go back to the conceptual plan for Matt Green from the 91 case? So on this, I wanted to make a note for the other commissioners. Mr. Carroll forwarded me the original case from 91, and the thoroughfare plan and the Powhite Parkway and all that were originally included in that plan. The developer at that time decided they did not want to do it, and the Planning Commission recommended denial of this case at a 5-0 vote and sent it to the Board of Supervisors. So part of where we are with traffic started back in 1991. I just want to make sure the commissioners were aware of that case from 91.
We also had a case called Branner Station that faced a similar fate.
Okay, I'm going to kind of get through the east stuff here. Again, it's the 700 acres would be for the piece to the east, east of Powhite, 700 acres, 200 of which, 150 to 200 acres would be for schools and school complex or other public facilities. There's been a discussion of having 3 schools within this 150, 200 acres, as well as a library and plenty of ball fields and everything else. There's an exhibit I'll show here in a minute that kind of shows the general conceptual layout of that they're talking about for that. And then the remaining 500 acres within this zoning case would be for single-family detached R15, which is a 15,000 square foot lot, basically a third acre in size, and a cap limit of 600 single-family dwelling units within that remaining 500 acres. So much more of a downsizing than the existing R9 that's there. And actually, most of the surrounding communities there have more dense development than what's being proposed here with the R15. And this is just being straight zoned. We're not putting any CUPDs in this, so it just have to meet the requirements of the R15 along with some of the proffers that they're proposing. Here's a general conceptual plan for the east side. It's showing the kind of the green pod areas as being the areas of development for R15 single-family detached housing. The blue is showing the school site, the 150 to 200 acres for that. The brown or orange that you see is in either open space or environmentally sensitive property that's being, would be controlled and hopefully conserved within that area with review by the environmental engineering department and the planning department. The idea of trying to run a very comprehensive trail system throughout this property, the 700 acres, up to Westerly and beyond, and eventually taking that all the way up to Horner Park is one of the directions we'd like to see happen with this. The idea that we could really connect all these future single-family detached areas by trail, pedestrian trails, to the future school sites is one of the kind of the nice, unique features that we think would be a real asset to Chesterfield to see happen in this area, where you could bike to school, or you could walk to school, or walk your kid to school. With that said, we also are showing the 200-foot buffer that basically runs along that eastern side of Powhite Parkway. Here is the school site that's being proposed. There's the three schools at this point. The high school is basically in this area. The middle school being proposed here, an elementary school. Even a library is being proposed, and then a lot of synergy type projects with ball fields and other cultural uses to be shared between the high school and the middle school is one of the plans for being a kind of a consolidated school campus area for all three levels of school as part of the concept here. There has been some discussion at some of the community meetings about lessening the number of schools in this area, but at this point, the idea of keeping all three schools in this 150 to 200 acre area is part of the plan. I've mentioned, I think earlier, about the north-south road. Basically, the north-south road that we're talking about is this here, which would serve from Westerly all the way down to Duval here at the bottom. You can't really see it, but it's further down. That connection starts to relieve a lot of the future traffic issues that could occur with the Westerly as you go further to the east. And I think transportation is going to talk about that a little bit in a minute.
Mr. Gillies?
Yeah.
One of the things that was mentioned at one of the community meetings is that, if I'm not mistaken, when these school sites are fully built out, that it's going to put around 10,000 cars on Westerly Parkway. And Westerly Parkway goes out onto Otterdale Road, so we're taking roughly 10,000 cars possibly on Westerly from a 4-lane road to a 2-lane road on Otterdale. That was mentioned at one of the meetings. I think it was the Westerly community meeting.
Yeah, I'm going to let transportation
Okay.
answer some of those volume questions for you. Not sure they would agree with those numbers.
Okay.
The buffer that I've already covered was the 200-foot buffer along the Powhite, and again, the connectivity of the trails with that concept plan is another important part that we're trying to keep as part of the master plan for this overall east side of the project. Also, with R15, we normally do not have any common area requirement within that. For this one, we were looking at having some additional common area requirements to be included with that R15 development. So it would be the trails that would somehow count with that, but the idea that we'd still be getting some amenities within these new R15 areas as we go forward. Also in the proffers, I'm not going to go through all of them, was the kind of the site and architectural designs. They're very similar to sets of proffers you've seen before for some of the more current cases that we've had. Limitation on materials and driveway materials, sidewalks, stoops, decks, all those things have been incorporated in that first set of proffers for this residential side, the R15. And then, again, trying to create a master plan for this east side too, so that will tie in with the trail system, eventually with the school complex to the north there, and create a good mix of public facility uses and accessibility, along with the future residential development on this east side. And with that, I'm going to stop talking and let environmental engineering come up and talk about some of their proffers in both cases. Mr. Smedley?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Gloria, for the stormwater comment. Mine will be a little briefer than the last two, but thank you for having me all here today. You're familiar with some of the flooding issues we've had up on Otterdale Road and so forth. So that was one of our big concerns when looking at this case, was some of the flooding issues potentially downstream. So I'll get to that last or second. But we have more stringent requirements in the Upper Swift Creek watershed. And some of the standard requirements we have within our ordinance, and we like to remind folks when they're developing the Upper Swift Creek watershed, is the enhanced erosion and sediment control requirements. So one of the things we ask for is super silt fence, which is basically a step up from the standard silt fence or an equivalent to that. We also require 25% larger sediment basins during construction. So Gloria, getting to your point that during the construction activities, we require those basins to be 25% larger than they would on a standard project. We also require or ask for, during construction, for areas that are denuded to use an anionic PAM. It basically holds the sediment in place, or for those areas to be covered with a flexible growth medium, such as a hydro seed with wood fibers in it, so that it decreases the amount of sediment runoff during construction. So those are some of the things that are in our proffers. As I was mentioning, related to the flooding downstream, you're familiar with the culverts being upgraded on Otterdale Road, and those are being designed to deal for the 100-year storm event. There are already properties out there that have floodplain recorded on them, and we want to make sure that any development occurring is not impacting those floodplain limits or, potentially increasing them. Also, any downstream facilities, such as culverts under smaller roads or stormwater facilities, we don't want those to be overtaken by anything less than, the 100-year storm. So we're making sure that whatever gets built on this site is not going to impact those downstream properties where we have the 100-year floodplain recorded, or the culverts aren't designed to handle the amount of flow coming downstream. So those are some of the things that we're concerned with. Also, that whole area of the county and most of Chesterfield County has highly erodible soils. So on the steep slopes where you have a slope greater than 20%, we don't want any impact to those or development on those. And in the event that the development will have to impact those, such as a road crossing or something like that, we'll need to see more protective measures in those areas so that we don't have increased runoff and erosion. So those are some of the things that we saw from the start during this case and from what we've dealt with in the past in that part of the county. One thing I would like to mention related to the stormwater concerns is that over the last 20 years, we've had more protective measures in that watershed, and water quality in the reservoir is still good, even from the housing boom in the mid-2000s and the most recent housing boom we've had in that part of the county. So the water quality is still good in the reservoir. We have a very healthy ecosystem within the reservoir. So the measures that have been put in place many years ago are working. And so I think there's some comfort that, those things are effective.
Mr. Sloan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Scott, and if these are already included in the Upper Swift Creek ordinances, I don't have them all out of my head, so if they are, just feel free to let me know. Why would we not see any proffered conditions in this case, like we have with quite a few that have come from the private sector that basically say the developer needs to ensure that any post-development runoff does not exceed pre-development runoff? And if there is, what are the mandated mitigation requirements that we would want to see? What are we looking at from a BMP standpoint? I bring that up because we're taking a heavily forested area and potentially getting rid of a lot of the old established trees and ground cover and creating significantly more runoff.
Right, so that's a good question because we do have those in a lot of specific cases where we know that, particularly in an infill development where, we have a piece of property that wasn't developed and we've got adjacent neighborhoods that are already built, and we want to make sure that, what is coming off of that site doesn't overtax or overcome older neighborhoods that were built under lesser standards. So here we've kind of done that, and that gets to the this point right here on the protection of downstream properties. So as you mentioned, a lot of times we may ask for a proffer that basically says the 100-year post-development runoff will not exceed the 100-year pre-development runoff. And so we're kind of asking for that here. It's just a little more general and broadcasting, so to speak. So we don't have a specific area right now that we know we're going to be draining to an older area. Most of these areas are newly developed, so they have higher standards for the stormwater runoff and the culvert designs. But if we come across an area during the design stage that doesn't have those adequate facilities, it's got to meet that 100-year requirement. Okay. So that kind of gets at your question.
Great, and again, please correct me if I'm wrong on this, or if I'm getting this turned around backwards. But do you feel that the 100-year storm measure is adequate given the significant rain events we've had during shorter time periods? Because I want to say we worked on a case together where up at Iron Bridge, where we looked at a shorter time period to account for the really big significant rains that we've had in recent time periods.
So the 100-year storm event is pretty much our most stringent that we have required.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Mr. Chair,
That's right.
thank you for being here. And one of the questions I had is, will there be a master plan for the total acreage that requires one large stormwater management facility, or will there be multiple stormwater management facilities as development occurs?
Because of the way this watershed is kind of bisected by the streams running through it, I don't think one large basin would be able to cover it all. Now, you may be able to have a few larger basins, but I think that remains to be seen based on who is recruited or who is pulled in, so to speak.
So as the wetlands and the floodplains, all that's delineated, and the developable areas are defined, would that put your department in the position of being able to estimate or predict the number that would be needed, or how do we know, conceptually even, if there is a master plan for how all that property is going to work together when it's developed?
Ideally, for the EDA to produce a large overall stormwater master plan, it will be better for them from a marketing standpoint to have that all addressed for anybody that they are trying to recruit to the site. One of the things that still needs to be submitted, as Mr. Hart alluded to, as they're going through their environmental analysis, and I've noted it here, is a natural resource inventory report, which includes all of the resource protection areas, the wetlands, and a few other features. That has to be turned in as part of the zoning process before you all vote on the case, and they're working on getting that to us.
And when you receive that, would that enable you to determine or what the kind of design, how would it be, what would it look like, how would it function, how would it operate? Would they be dry ponds, wet ponds? Would they be amenitized, or should they be, or would you be in a position to make any kind of prediction about that?
We would probably have more of an idea of what wouldn't work in some locations, because some of the locations, if you've got wetlands close by, high water table, it's going to be more difficult to have a wet pond there. It's also going to be tougher to have a dry pond, a detention facility in those locations. So that will narrow down some of their options in those areas and direct their path, so to speak, on what could be built out there.
And so your approach at this point is to set these standards that any stormwater management facility would have to operate or function within.
Well, those are already set out, so to speak. We have a ordinance related to the Upper Swift Creek watershed. Residential properties have to meet either a .22 standard for phosphorus removal or the new stormwater, well, they're not really new anymore. They're 7 years old now, from 2014. But basically, the engineer has to run both calculations. Whichever one is more stringent is the one they have to use. And then on the commercial side, the new stormwater standards are more stringent than what was in place before. So that's even more protective of the reservoir. So they will have to do those calculations and see where those play out. But as for that overall stormwater master plan, that's probably not going to come about until you get a better idea of what's going to be coming in and, how large of a tract of land they will take up.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Dr. Hilton.
So it really has become apparent to me kind of what I think the public is really having an issue with, right? A lot of what we're talking about now, we usually talk about behind closed doors with developers, right? And so we're usually talking about stormwater, we're talking about environmental issues, we're talking about traffic and all this, right? And I think that as a county, since this is a county project, right, the county has really been transparent about where we are with different areas of the project, right? And so it's a little bit of how does this case compare to other cases, right? And I think that because the county is an applicant, and Andy, if you want to jump in, please feel free, and any other staff members. But we usually have these kind of conversations behind closed doors in our development meetings, and with the different departments, right? And now we're kind of having those conversations now in public, and it might not look like we have it all together, right? Because there's some things that we still have to go back and look and analyze and do some more research, right? I think that's kind of what we're all asking our questions about. But a lot of times when we have a case come before us, it's already laid out, if you will, a little bit more firm than where we are right now. So do you think that some of that is maybe where the concern is coming from? Because when I hear a school, a fire station, jobs come into the area, I get excited. But this is kind of one of those situations where the Board of Supervisors invoked this plan, rightfully so, because they saw that the area is growing and the need for these public amenities are in great need, and will be in even greater need in the future. So we're just having some conversation based on the project in public that ordinarily with another developer, we would have had maybe more private. Is that the elephant in the room that I'm maybe calling out?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Sloan.
You know, Dr. Hilton, I think that when we're working with the development community on smaller residential cases, those cases spend months, if not a year, working with the staff, working through the nuances of all of these issues. And staff, they go through multiple TRC meetings. You know, the different departments spend weeks, months working with the developer because they've got specific site plans, they know exactly what's going to go on the site, those types of things. I can say, and Commissioner Fry can step in, but when I think of cases like the Matoaca mega site, cases involving Dominion Power and landfill issues and Carvana and the water park, this body has spent. Sorry, Scott. This body has had numerous. How many work sessions did we have on the water park? 6. Yeah. 6 and numerous community meetings. So this is the only opportunity for us as a commission to look at a case together in its entirety, because and that's you know, so we hear from citizens their concerns, and so I mean, I believe where we are is there's been an initial set of proffers, you know, that have been drafted. Like in all these other cases, there's been an initial set. So now it's up to this body. And I've received very specific instructions. While the board maybe initiated this, it is absolutely up to this body to make sure that that we do our due diligence and make sure this case is the very best it can possibly be before it advances beyond this body.
Right, rightfully so. But I kind of want to just point that out there. I think that some of the comments are very specific, but we don't really have very specific answers just yet. Just as the types of industries that will come in, we don't know some of that information. So we have to zone it right, and then what we do, well, after we zone it right, then we'll go out and recruit those businesses that would fit the profile for where we're trying to go with the zoning. And so there are some unknowns in the case. So if you look at maybe even like Courthouse Landing or some of the other cases that have come before us that were very controversial, we knew some of the types of uses that were going to be there, and we could predict them. We might not know the actual business names that were coming per se, but we knew we were going to have a hotel. We knew we were going to have restaurants. We knew we were going to have multifamily, townhouses, that sort of thing. I think where we are with citizens right now is we're saying we don't know what we're going to get, but here's a profile of businesses that we're trying to attract, right? And so I think that's a heartburn for some citizens because they feel like we should have, and I said this at our last planning commission meeting, they feel like we should have the business and then we should do the rezoning. But we can't do that because what we have to do is do the rezoning and then go attract those businesses. Because the zoning process, as you alluded to, Commissioner Salone, is that the planning process to get it zoned the right way is too long for the business to wait. They're going to go to another locality, and we won't have the opportunity. The train would have left the station. We would have never had the opportunity to board because we never had our ticket. What we're doing now is going to get us the ticket that we need to bring those jobs to the locality that we love very dearly, Chesterfield County, right? So that's really a different type of development project, and really what the citizens are having, when I read some of the comments, what they're having a hard time understanding. We know that depending on where a locality, where a business will go on the site, will kind of help steer the environmental piece of it, right? Depending on what type of business it is, it's going to tell the stormwater drainage and where the wastewater goes and that sort of thing, where they go on the map, on the plat. I think that's really, we really don't know because we have to zone it right first, and then we have to trust our departments and our staff to walk us through that process after it's zoned. That's my point.
I kind of understand what you're saying, Mr. Hilton. I remember reading a story on the internet a couple years ago, and it's a true story because I read it on the internet. But it was actually legit. There's two gentlemen who lived in Great Britain who wanted to go visit Sydney, and they found a really great deal on the internet that was $200 a ticket to Sydney. So they buy their ticket, they board the plane, and they end up in Sydney, Canada. So I think what we're doing here is we're trying not to be those two guys in Great Britain. We're trying to make sure that the ticket we're buying to make this trip to Sydney, Australia is actually the trip to Sydney, Australia. So I understand what you're saying here, and there is some concept behind the we build it and they will come, but if we build it, we have to make sure it is built right. And I think we're going through the right process to make sure, if this does go through, that it is the right thing, and we've done the right things. The things that Mr. Smedley's doing here today are telling us the standards that we're looking for and the things we're doing here. We got a couple other questions that need to come up, but I think we're making sure we buy the right ticket to the right Sydney, is what I think we're doing.
Right. Totally agree.
Yeah.
We're in line.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Chair, just to add on to that, the way I'm looking at our case is that we are, as Commissioner Sloan raised earlier, we're looking for the performance standards. We're building a box of this is the zoning. This is what's required. These are the conditions that are going to address the impacts and the issues that have been identified by our staff and by the citizens. And so what we're looking for now is developing those conditions that will mitigate those issues and make the best case we can. So we're building a box, and that's the way I'm looking at it, and looking to staff to help us build the best attractive box we can that addresses these issues that have been raised.
Exactly.
I do think one of the things we're trying to do from a staff standpoint is not make that box too constrictive up front. Too, it's a balancing act. And the idea that we've been leaning towards is trying, upon entitlement, to come forward with a master site plan an actual master plan, conceptual master plan for the entire 1,700 acres and for the 700 acres, so that we would still develop those design standards even after the zoning case comes through. We'd spend the time, we could get some public involvement in that. We could work towards getting those design standards to go along with the zoning, and until those design standards are completed in the next 3 to 9 months or whatever, nobody can build anything out there. That would be the general direction that staff's trying to see if that will be acceptable to you all, to see if we can kind of do it in those steps, because we do need to get the entitlement first in this, so they can start recruiting and going after grant funds and so forth. And we have the luxury of the county owning it, so it's not, as Mr. Hart mentioned earlier, they're not gonna sell it just to the highest bidder just because the highest bidder comes in. They're gonna really wait and see what developers can come in and actually provide jobs and provide a quality long-term product here. And so that's the direction I think we're trying to move with having the master plans in both of these projects, the east and the west, so that we could kind of keep this moving forward. And I know it's a little different than we normally do, but it is county owned, so it's a little different situation.
I have actually a question in two parts. One of them is going to be for you, and one of them is going to be for utilities. One of the things having to do with an environmental part of this is there's a couple of these industries here that could include potential runoff and things that happen from the product that could cause leaching into the soil and so forth. A lot of the homes that surround this area run off of well water and drinking water. And so I'm wondering what type of studies would need to be done to look at each one of these industries to see how they would behave in that environment and what they would give off?
Well, we would take those on a case-by-case basis. We don't have regulatory authority over, wells, but typically, as part of the, our environmental engineering department, we get asked about those type of questions. You might remember some similar cases recently.
Yes.
So we would look at those on a case-by-case basis. If there were any constituents of concern being stored or manufactured on site, that we would want to have, additional buffers or protective measures in place.
Fellow commissioners, we're coming up on the 5 o'clock mark. Do we want to continue this for about 15 extra minutes, and then we'll suspend this and talk about what to do our next steps? Does that work for everyone? Okay.
All right. Ms. Fry, I will add that at the Minnoville Technology Park, there was a stormwater master plan there, and that has worked very well as, subsequent industries came in, businesses came in. So it's obviously in the EDA's benefit to design that from the start.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Sloan?
So I've mentioned a couple times where we're calling for somewhat limited perimeter buffering, and the belief is that the existing trees can remain. Again, you and I have had many lively debates about having the necessity from a drainage standpoint to strip clear sites for whatever reason, for drainage and things like that. And I know this is maybe somewhat rhetorical, but you can't provide an assurance that buffer areas can remain, all the buffer areas can remain wooded, can you?
Smaller buffers have a harder time with, live trees.
Okay.
So obviously, the larger an area of forested area is, more likely to survive.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for environmental? All right, Mr. Gillies, who's the next department, sir?
We have utilities up next.
All right, thank you. Mr. Nannery?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Congratulations on your election, Mr. Vice Chair, and Mrs. Fry, thank you for your guidance the last 2 years. I'm Mike Nannery. I'm Assistant Director for Utilities. I'm going to talk a little bit about the utility proffers for this project. We have broken this project into like 2 separate categories. One where we are proffering conditions on both the east and the west side projects. That said, these are pretty basic proffers that you will recognize. Connection to the utilities water and wastewater system is being proffered, and we are coordinating with the applicant for that. This area in its totality is within the mandatory connection area for both public water and wastewater. With that said, we will have a provision that will allow any of the existing structures that are there that are anticipated to be residential until they redevelop can remain on their well and septic systems. We talked a lot with environmental about overall plans and master plans. You will see consistently utilities ask for overall utility plans as a proffer. We are looking for orderly expansion of our system to serve areas both within the development and upstream in our future customers. Part of that is reliability and redundancy. We want to make sure that if there is an outage for an unplanned pipe problem, that we can backfeed our areas. Some of that is details that are written into the proffers, and we are still coordinating with the applicant, the EDA, for some of that as well. Offsite improvements are also anticipated to be needed, especially for the western side, depending on what use actually comes there. So we have included that as one of the requested proffers. and dedication of easements. That's something that we want to make sure that if we need to get upstream of this area before the time of the project and development is done, that we can ask for those easements to be dedicated. And the applicant has been working on those with us. And those easements are done consistently with the utility master plan. What are we doing extra for the west? The master plan, the overall utility plan will be a lot more complicated because it's manufacturing. Our system currently is sized for that almost 1,400 residential units we talked about that the current zoning allows for. We'll be requiring detailed engineering analysis once we have a specific prospect in mind. Elevated water storage tank, Mr. Gillies mentioned that in his proposal. I would caveat that needs to be plural because we're not sure what that use will be. Out of the 8 uses, the data centers and the microchip processors are very dependent on our service. Offices, not so much. A wastewater pump station is a bulleted item in this slide as well. There is an area that is not served to the east currently with gravity. It flows towards the Appomattox River, and a wastewater pump station may be needed depending on how that develops to serve that area. Dedication of land, because we're going to have facilities, we are asking that the applicant dedicate land for both water tanks or a wastewater pump station if needed. 2-acre site for a water storage tank is typical, and a 3-acre minimum site is typical for a wastewater pump station. Lastly, on this slide, responsible parties for the west. The slides look like they're out of order, Steve. There we go, thank you. For the west is the developer. The developer's responsible for doing all the construction items and required infrastructure improvements to support the project. We will allow phasing as long as the phasing can take care of its demands for each part of the development. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Your part 2 of my question to Mr. Smedley. A couple of these industries require water, a lot of water, and some of that may be producing a hazardous byproduct that is going to be going back into the system. Do we have the ability to treat that water adequately based on contaminants that may be put into the water, specifically the pharmaceutical industry and chip manufacturing, and maybe some of the plastics having to do with carcinogens that are eliminated during the cooling process?
Yes, sir, we do. We have a very robust pre-treatment program. If that is the case, what you were describing would be a permitted discharger to our system. We regulate them. Part of one of the things that Mr. Smedley was asked was about spill prevention. Interior floor drains that may spill that go to our system, we regulate and inspect for that. They would have to remove some of those substances that you mentioned prior to sending them to us and dispose of them in an appropriate manner.
Okay. The other question, on a wastewater pumping station site, does that involve an open air tank for storage prior to pumping, or is it just a pumping center where it continually pumps?
It would have a storage, we call it what is called a wet well. It is covered, it's not open air. If it is warranted, we will have odor control, corrosion control. Those are typical engineering things that we utility engineers like to plan for in our system, especially when they're regional.
Okay. I was asking because there is a concern in this area already about odor from another facility, and I wondered if this facility would have an odor issue, or is it contained and burned off like methane is at some facilities?
I'm not anticipating that with this facility based on what residence time the wastewater would have in the system, although we need to know what the characteristics of that wastewater are. So.
Other commissioners? All right, thank you, Mr. Nannery.
Sure, thank you.
Do we have anyone else today?
We have transportation, I think.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I'd like to start with the traffic impact analysis that we've had conducted. The analysis is designed and intended to evaluate the impacts on the roadway network due to the proposed zoning. We received the TIA on Friday, January 14th, and submitted that to VDOT for their review on the same day. It's also posted on the project website, which you can see here on the slide, and we have a hard copy of the TIA in our office as well. It looks at existing conditions. It also forecasts future traffic without the proposed development, and then adds on the future traffic with the proposed development. Lastly, it recommends the mitigation measures and is based on operational analysis and a safety review. And the proffers that we'll be talking about today are informed by the TIA. So we looked at the study area. On the eastern case, 14 study intersections were analyzed, and on the western case, 22 study intersections were looked at. The traffic volumes were collected in 2019 and 2021. They were estimated for the intersections that don't currently exist, i.e. those that are shown as future roadways and intersections on the thoroughfare plan. And a COVID adjustment factor was applied to the AM peak of 1.08 and the PM peak hour 1.11. So first off, we looked at the traffic conditions in the future without the development. We looked at 3 study years for the eastern case, 2024, which involved the middle school only, 2035, which is build out of the eastern, the proposed eastern rezoning, and then 2041 is a year that is analyzed for design purposes. On the western side, we looked at 2 design years, 2035 and 2041. We looked at background growth based on the existing 2019 and 2021 traffic volumes, and they were grown using a conservative growth rate of 2%, which was developed based on the Richmond Regional Travel Demand Model, historical traffic count data, VDOT statewide planning system database, a current study that we have underway on 360, as well as socioeconomic data. And for each study year that we talked about, the AM and PM peak hour operational analyses were conducted for each of the intersections on the map. So once we had the background growth and the traffic information without the development, then we overlaid the projected traffic resulting from the development. So basically what that means is you take the future traffic without the development, you add in estimated site trips. The site trips are generated based on the most recent edition of the ITE Trip Gen manual, which is the 11th edition. And then again, for each study year, we looked at AM and PM peak hour operational analyses for each intersection. And then we recommended improvements to mitigate the impact of the proposed rezoning. And just to give you a brief overview of the chart that you see in front of you, the eastern case generates roughly 16,000 daily trips in the design year. A good rule of thumb through analyzing the numbers is a third of those trips are a result of the residential, a third of those trips are a result of the high school that's proposed, and then the other third is the combination of the trips between the elementary and the middle combined. The western case, we looked at an industrial park land use within the TIA manual, the ITE manual, and those trips were based on 8,000 square feet of industrial space per acre for the 1,732 acres, which results in a little over 13.8 thousand square feet and a total of just under 47,000 daily trips.
Mr. Chair. And I apologize. So,
It's a little difficult to read, yes, sir.
so KCF, that's not square footage, that's.
KCF is 1,000 square feet. So it's
So
13,000,
1.3 million square feet.
13,856,000 square feet.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. So based on the information that was proposed by the applicant and the traffic impact analysis, the following are CDOT's suggested proffered conditions. So the first thing we start off with is a transportation density condition. And for the eastern case, the maximum density of development will be the 2,400 student high school, 1,800 student middle school, 1,000 student elementary, a public library, and 600 single-family dwelling units. We've included a road cash proffer statement stating that the applicant shall pay $9,400 for each dwelling unit. Should the applicant decide to undertake any off-site improvements, we would entertain off-site credit against the cash proffers. Dedication of right-of-way for the Powhite Parkway, the Powhite Parkway interchanges, the north-south arterial, Westerly Parkway, the north-south collector road, the Duval Road realignment, existing Duval, as well as any stub streets would be a part of the dedication proffered condition. Also included in the eastern case, we have an access proffered condition such that any site, prior to any plan approval, an access plan for Westerly Parkway, the north-south collector, Duval, and the north-south arterial 1 will be submitted to and approved by us. Again, our suggested road improvement proffered conditions are informed by the traffic impact analysis, and it will include a reconstruction of Otterdale Road and Duval Road intersection to include realignment and construction of turn lanes and intersection control, construction of additional pavement and intersection control at Otterdale Road and Westerly Parkway intersection, construction of 4 lanes for Westerly Parkway, including pedestrian accommodations and crosswalk improvements, construction of additional pavement at Westerly Parkway in the north-south collector for left and right turn lanes, including intersection control, construction of a 4-lane facility for the north-south collector, including pedestrian accommodation and crosswalk improvements, construction of a 4-lane facility for Duval Road with modifications as approved by us from Otterdale Road to the north-south collector intersection. Construction of a 4-lane facility for Otterdale Road from Duval Road to Woolridge Road. Construction of an additional lane of pavement at the north-south collector road and Duval Road intersection to provide left and right turn lanes, including intersection control. Widening and improving the north side of Duval Road to a 12-foot wide travel lane with an additional 4-foot paved shoulder and a 4-foot unpaved shoulder, and overlaying the full width of the road along the property frontage not improved as a part of the previous improvement to Duval Road. Finally, construction of 2 lanes of the north-south arterial 1, which is the Magnolia Green Parkway extension, including pedestrian accommodations and crosswalk improvements from its existing terminus to the Powhite Parkway right-of-way. And again, dedication to the county, free and unrestricted of any additional right-of-way. The eastern case also includes a phasing plan proffer condition such that prior to any site plan approval, a phasing plan will be submitted. The initial development we have defined as including development of the middle school site only. So the following improvements would be made along with the construction of the middle school. Proffered condition 12A, which is the reconstruction of Otterdale and the Otterdale Road and Duval Road intersection. 12B, which is the construction of intersection control and eastbound channelized right turn lane from Westerly Parkway to southbound Otterdale Road. Construction of 2 lanes for Westerly Parkway and associated improvements from its existing terminus to the north-south collector intersection. Left and right turn lanes at the Westerly Parkway and north-south collector intersection. And finally, construction of 2 lanes of the north-south collector and associated improvements from Westerly Parkway south to the southern terminus of the middle school property. Wanted to give you a quick overview of what some of these improvements look like. This is the Otterdale and Woolridge Road intersection. This is a conceptual graphic of the free flow right turn lane from Westerly Parkway onto Otterdale Road with associated signal improvements. A conceptual plan of a continuous green T at Duval and Otterdale Road intersection. Improvements to Woolridge Road and Genito Road. Now I'd like to transfer to the western case. Again, the first proffer condition will be dedication of right-of-way for the Powhite Parkway, the Powhite Parkway and North-South Arterial 1 interchange, North-South Arterial 1 and 2, Westerly Parkway, East-West Arterials 1 and 2, Duval Road realigned, Mosley Road, Duval Road, and various stub roads. Again, an access proffer condition such that prior to any plan approval, an access plan will be provided showing the corresponding road references at time that they are required. Road improvements for the western case, and again, these are CDOT suggested proffer conditions informed by the TIA. The first proffer condition would be that the owner-developer will submit for approval by CDOT a traffic impact analysis and plan for the overall development showing the road improvements necessitated by the proposed uses. We listed this initially because, again, when you're talking about as many square feet of industrial as we're talking about, we don't know if it's going to come in as one large user, a bunch of small users, and we're going to require that a traffic study be submitted showing the impact of whatever use and whatever amount of square feet come in initially. The road proffer construction list is quite lengthy. It includes Powhite Parkway from Hull Street to its existing terminus to the north, improvements to the 360 and Skin Corner intersection, 360 from Beaver Bridge Road to Cosby Road, widening to 6 lanes, Westerly Parkway from Otterdale Road to the westernmost property line as a 4-lane facility, a north-south collector from Westerly Parkway to Duval as a 4-lane, the north-south arterial 1, Mount Herman, Magnolia Green from Genito to Woolridge Road as a 4-lane, the north-south arterial 2, Duval Road from Westerly Parkway to Skin Quarter Road as a 4-lane, the east-west arterial 2 from the north-south arterial 1 to Mosley Road is a 4-lane. Duval Road realigned and Duval Road from Otterdale Road to the north-south arterial as a 4-lane. Duval Road from the southernmost property line to Skin Quarter as an improved 2-lane. Improving Mosley Road from Westerly Parkway to Skin Quarter as an improved 2-lane. Skin Quarter Road from Mosley Road to Route 360 as an improved 2-lane. Genito Road from Mount Herman to Otterdale as an improved 2-lane. The Genito Road and Woolridge Road intersection. Otterdale Road from Duval to Woolridge as a 4-lane. And again, additional dedication of any additional right-of-way that's required. Also requiring a phasing plan in this proffer condition. And then some quick schematics of those improvements. I think folks have seen these before, the Powhite Parkway extension. This is a proposed improvement to Skin Quarter and 360. Intersection improvement at Beaver Bridge Road and 360. Improvements to the intersection of Magnolia Green Parkway and 360. You'll note 360 shown as a 6-lane divided facility in this conceptual graphic. Improvements to Otterdale and 360. I'll note that the improvements here along Otterdale Road are included as part of an existing project CDOT is already managing. Improvements to Otterdale and Woolridge Road, adding an additional approach lanes to Otterdale Road. So what I thought I'd end with, after that mouthful, is a quick summary table of what the traffic study recommends, what the CDOT suggested proffered conditions include, and then what we've recently just seen submitted through the EDA and their proffered conditions. So you'll note that all of the recommendations from the traffic study, CDOT has developed a proffered condition for, with the exception of adding a northbound through lane at the Woolridge and Genito intersection, which is already included in another project, as well as the improvements to Otterdale Road at 360 that we just mentioned are also included as part of another project. We did receive recently some proposed proffers from the EDA, and there's no change to any of the suggestions we've made, with one exception. We call for specific 4-laning of Otterdale Road in a certain section, and they're softening that language to constructing the necessary upgrades to Otterdale from Duval to Woolridge. So with that one exception, there have been no proposed changes as yet to the CDOT proposed proffers. I would also like to add, we've requested schools prepare a detailed school traffic operations plan to optimize their student drop-off and pickup operations, as well as to analyze any impacts in queuing to public rights-of-way. And also, one additional detail that I wanted to make sure got included, pedestrian accommodations, just because they aren't listed in this table, they are included in certain proffered conditions, as I read through earlier. And then finally, on the west, the west summary table is even a little more difficult to read, but again, I'll just highlight that we took the recommendations from the traffic study, we developed a list of proposed proffers, and with 4 exceptions, the submitted proffers by the EDA do not change those proposals. The 4 exceptions are adding an additional northbound through lane at Woolridge and Genito, which, as I've mentioned, is included in another CDOT project. The EDA proffers, as currently submitted, do not include widening 360 from Cosby Road to Beaver Bridge Road, 4 lanes to 6 lanes. They don't include improving Genito Road as a good 2-lane from Otterdale to Mount Herman, nor do they include improving Mosley Road to a good 2-lane from Westerly to Skin Quarter. So again, one other detail on the western case I'll add is that the developer will submit for approval by CDOT a traffic study and plan for overall development showing the proposed improvements associated with each phase of their development. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Commissioners, do you have any questions you would like to ask Mr. Sloan?
Mr. Chair, I have a fairly lengthy list of questions. I'd probably say, I don't know if we're going to do this another work session, but for most of them, but the one I would like an answer to was, as a basis for the traffic study, was the assumption used that the Powhite Parkway existed or doesn't exist?
The assumption is that it does not exist, but that it will be required as a result of the development.
So if the Powhite Parkway were not to be built, it changes everything.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Commissioners, with your all's consent, I think we should probably look to our next meeting to do another work session on this and continue to review this. So I'd like to go ahead and make sure we put this on our next work session.
That's fine. I was just going to mention that we have another work session with the Board of Supervisors next week on the 26th, similar to this. And then we have a scheduled community meeting at CTC Hall on February 3rd that's coming up. And if After those two things, the next item would be a continuation of this at the next planning commission meeting on the 15th. Staff will work
And
towards that.
we'll talk about time during the recess for the next commission meeting. I think it's at 3, but based on today, we may need to
Yeah,
alter that.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, with that being said, we have 2 other items on the agenda for the work session. I'd like to go ahead and just suspend those 2 items and move into recess. So we are now in recess.